Solis's Cannibal Feast. On January 20th, 1516, Spanish navigator Juan Diaz de Solis made his first significant landing on the banks of the Rio de la Plata in present-day Uruguay. He was a seasoned explorer with years of experience navigating unknown waters. That morning, he spotted indigenous people watching from the dunes along the shoreline. They appeared to be Charrua or Guarani. Solis decided to go ashore with a small party to attempt trade. He selected 2 officers and 7 crew members to accompany him. The group climbed into the landing boat and rowed toward the beach. The natives remained on the dunes as the Spanish boat approached. Solis and his men stepped onto the sand. They carried trade goods and weapons. The indigenous group moved closer. For a moment, everything appeared calm. Then the natives suddenly attacked with primitive weapons. The Spanish had no time to organize a defense. The assault was swift and overwhelming. Every man in the landing party was slaughtered except for one young cabin boy who managed to survive. The main ships remained anchored offshore. The crew aboard watched helplessly as their captain and companions were killed on the beach. What happened next horrified them beyond anything they had witnessed before. The natives built a fire on the sand. They began roasting Solis's body and consuming his flesh piece by piece in full view of the ships. The sailors could do nothing but watch as their captain was devoured. The terror of what they had seen affected every man who remained. No one suggested mounting a rescue. No one proposed retaliation. The crew made an immediate decision to abandon the expedition entirely. They raised anchor and sailed directly back to Spain. The voyage that was meant to explore and claim new territories ended in retreat. Juan Diaz de Solis died on the beach where he had hoped to establish peaceful trade. Verrazzano's public evisceration. In 1528, renowned Florentine explorer Giovanni da Verrazzano anchored his ship off the coast of a Caribbean island, likely Guadeloupe. He had spent months charting unknown coastlines and making contact with various indigenous populations. His brother Girolamo was aboard the main vessel that morning. From the deck, they observed a group of natives gathered on the beach. The people appeared curious and welcoming. Verrazzano decided to go ashore to greet them. He climbed into a small boat with a few crew members and rowed toward the shore. As the boat reached shallow water, Verrazzano stepped out and waded onto the sand. The natives moved closer. The explorer raised his hand in greeting. For a brief moment, the encounter seemed peaceful. Then the crowd instantly turned violent. They rushed forward and overpowered the navigator before he could draw his weapon. His crew members were also overwhelmed. Girolamo watched from the ship as the natives attacked his brother. There was nothing he could do from that distance. The crowd surrounded Verrazzano completely. They brought him down to the sand. The natives proceeded to end his life and immediately began cutting his body into pieces while the flesh was still warm. The crew aboard the ship witnessed everything unfolding on the beach. Someone ordered the cannons fired. The crew hoped the noise and threat would scatter the natives and allow them to recover the body. The cannons roared across the water. Smoke drifted over the bay. The natives on the beach ignored the blast completely. They did not scatter or retreat. Instead, they consumed the explorer's remains on the spot in full view of the ship. The crew could only watch in horror. No rescue was possible. Girolamo had witnessed his brother's death and what followed. The ship eventually withdrew from the island. Giovanni da Verrazzano's body was never recovered. Tasman's Cockboat Massacre. On December 19, 1642, Dutch explorer Abel Tasman anchored in what is now Golden Bay, New Zealand. This marked the first meeting between Europeans and Maori people. The morning was calm as Tasman's ship sat in the bay. Several waka, traditional Maori canoes, paddled out from shore to inspect the strange vessels that had appeared in their waters. The Maori warriors were curious about these foreign ships. The Dutch crew wanted to communicate. Someone suggested making noise to signal peaceful intentions. The Europeans blew trumpets from the deck. The sound carried across the water. The Maori responded by blowing their conch shells in return. The Dutch interpreted this as a friendly greeting. They believed the exchange meant the natives welcomed their presence. They were mistaken. The conch shell blast was a ritual challenge, not a gesture of peace. Later that morning, a small cockboat was launched to transfer messages between the 2 Dutch ships. Several sailors climbed aboard and began rowing across the open water between the vessels. It was a routine task. The men were unarmed and focused on their work. One of the Maori waka suddenly changed course and accelerated toward the small boat. The canoe rammed directly into the cockboat. Warriors immediately attacked the sailors with clubs. The Dutch crew aboard the main ships watched as 4 of their men were struck down. The bodies were hauled into the canoes. The Maori took the dead sailors toward the shore. The bodies were likely taken for consumption, though the Dutch could not confirm what happened next. Tasman ordered an immediate retreat. No landing party would be sent. No further contact would be attempted. The Dutch ships raised anchor and departed the bay. Tasman later named the location Murderers Bay. The first contact between Europeans and Maori had ended in violence and withdrawal. Missionaries' fatal trespass. On November 17, 2018, American missionary John Allen Chow paid local fishermen to smuggle him illegally to North Sentinel Island in India. The island was forbidden territory. The Sentinelese people who lived there had remained in total isolation for thousands of years. Indian authorities had made the island off-limits to all outsiders to protect both the tribe and potential visitors. Chow knew this. He went anyway. His mission was to preach Christianity to the Sentinelese. The fishermen brought him close to shore but would not land. Chow waded through the shallow water and stepped onto the beach. He carried a Bible. The tribesmen emerged from the forest and moved toward him. Chow held up the Bible and began walking forward. A young boy raised a bow and released an arrow. The arrow struck the Bible Chow was holding and pierced through it. The missionary did not retreat. He continued advancing toward the tribe. The Sentinelese rushed him. They wrapped a rope around his neck. Chow was dragged across the sand. The tribesmen pulled him along the beach until he stopped moving. The fishermen watched from their boat offshore. They could see what was happening but could do nothing to intervene. They eventually withdrew to avoid their own confrontation with the tribe. The following day, fishermen returned and observed from a distance. They saw the Sentinelese burying Chow's body in the shallow water along the beach. The tribe was disposing of the remains. Indian authorities were informed of the incident. They made no attempt to recover the body. Any rescue mission would require landing on the island, which would provoke further violence with the isolated tribe. The decision was made to leave Chow's body where it was. John Allen Chow's remains were never retrieved from North Sentinel Island. Roggeveen's Easter Volley. On April 10, 1722, Dutch Admiral Jacob Roggeveen became the first European to step onto Easter Island, known locally as Rapa Nui. His expedition had been at sea for months searching for new lands. The island appeared on the horizon that morning, and Roggeveen ordered his ships to anchor offshore. He assembled a landing party and rowed to the beach. Hundreds of islanders immediately surrounded the Dutch explorers as they stepped onto the sand. The natives had never seen Europeans before. They were fascinated by everything about these strange visitors. The islanders reached out and touched the Dutchman's clothing. They ran their hands over the fabric and examined the texture. They inspected the weapons the soldiers carried. They touched the metal of the muskets and studied the strange tools. The mood seemed curious, rather than hostile. The Dutch remained calm but alert. One islander grew bolder than the rest. He reached forward and grabbed a soldier's musket directly from his hands. The soldier tried to pull it back. Other islanders moved closer. The Dutch crew panicked. Someone gave an order or perhaps acted without orders. The soldiers opened fire at point-blank range into the crowd. The islanders fell in the sand. Between 10 and 12 people were killed instantly by the musket fire. Many others were wounded and collapsed or staggered away from the beach. The remaining crowd scattered in terror. They had never heard gunfire before. They had never seen weapons that could strike someone down from a distance. The survivors ran toward the interior of the island. Roggeveen ordered his men back to the boats. The landing party retreated to the ships. The expedition did not remain on Easter Island. They departed shortly after the incident. The island's very first contact with the outside world had lasted only minutes and ended in bloodshed on the sand. Garrison's silent slaughter. In November 1493, Christopher Columbus returned to Hispaniola, present-day Haiti, on his second voyage to the New World. He had left 39 men behind during his first expedition at a settlement called La Navidad. The men were supposed to establish a colony and begin building relationships with the local Taino people. Columbus expected to find a thriving outpost waiting for him. He had been gone for nearly a year. His ships approached the coastline where La Navidad had been built. Something looked wrong from a distance. As they drew closer, Columbus could see that the settlement had been burned to the ground. No structures remained standing. No smoke rose from cooking fires. No one came to the shore to greet the returning ships. The landing party went ashore to investigate. They found rotting corpses scattered across the beach. The bodies of the Spanish settlers lay in the sand where they had fallen. Their eyes had been gouged out. The tropical sun and heat had caused the remains to decompose for weeks. The smell was overwhelming. Flies covered everything. The crew searched the area but found no survivors among the 39 men who had been left behind. Columbus demanded answers from the local Taino people. They explained what had happened during his absence. The Spanish settlers had mistreated local women. The men had also fought violently among themselves over the women and over gold. A rival cacique, a local chief, had ordered a retaliatory attack in response to the Spanish behavior. His warriors had attacked La Navidad and ended every settler. The discovery destroyed Columbus's vision of a peaceful paradise in the New World. The fantasy of cooperative colonization was gone. The burned settlement and decomposing bodies on the beach set the tone for the brutal conquest that would follow in the years ahead. Cook's violent end. On February 14, 1779, Captain James Cook attempted to kidnap the ruling chief of Hawaii at Kealakekua Bay. Cook was one of the most accomplished explorers of his era, having mapped vast portions of the Pacific Ocean. That morning, he went ashore with a contingent of Marines to seize the chief and hold him hostage. The reason was simple. Someone had stolen a cutter boat from one of Cook's ships, and he wanted it returned. A large crowd of native Hawaiians gathered on the shore as Cook and his men arrived. The atmosphere grew tense. Word suddenly spread through the crowd that British sailors had killed a lower-ranking chief across the bay during a separate confrontation. The news changed everything. The mood turned hostile immediately. The Hawaiians began moving closer to Cook and his men. Cook recognized the danger. He decided to retreat to the boats. He turned his back to the crowd and began walking toward the water. A Hawaiian warrior stepped forward with a club. He struck Cook on the head. The blow staggered the captain. Before Cook could recover, another warrior stabbed him in the neck with a blade. Cook fell forward into the surf. His face went into the water. The crowd swarmed over him immediately. Multiple warriors stabbed him repeatedly as he lay in the shallow water. The Marines on the beach fired their muskets and tried to reach their captain, but the crowd was too large. They were forced to retreat to the boats. Cook's body remained on the shore with the Hawaiians. The Hawaiians later treated Cook's remains according to their traditional funeral rites reserved for high-ranking chiefs. The practice involved baking the flesh off the bones to preserve them as sacred relics. Some of Cook's bones were eventually returned to his crew. The great navigator died in the surf at Kealakekua Bay. Ponce's poisoned wound. In July 1521, Juan Ponce de Leon returned to the southwest coast of Florida with 200 settlers. He had discovered Florida years earlier and now intended to establish the first permanent European colony in North America. His ships carried supplies, livestock, and everything needed to build a settlement. The indigenous Calusa people had lived in the region for centuries and had no intention of allowing foreign invaders to claim their land. Ponce de Leon's expedition landed and immediately began attempting to construct their settlement. The Calusa observed the Spanish activity and prepared to resist. They launched a surprise attack on the colonists as buildings were being erected. Warriors emerged from the forest with bows and arrows. The Spanish scrambled to defend themselves, but the assault was swift and well coordinated. During the fighting, Ponce de Leon was struck in the thigh by a reed arrow. The Calusa had dipped their arrows in the sap of the manchineel tree, one of the most toxic plants in the region. The arrow had been poisoned. The Spanish managed to repel the attack and drive the Calusa warriors back into the forest, but the damage had been done. The poison began causing an agonizing infection in Ponce de Leon's thigh. The wound deteriorated rapidly. The severity of the injury forced Ponce de Leon to make a decision. He ordered the entire expedition to abandon Florida immediately. The colonists packed what they could salvage and boarded the ships. They sailed for Cuba. The voyage was difficult. Ponce de Leon suffered severe pain throughout the journey to Cuba. The infection from the poisoned arrow continued to worsen. Shortly after the ships arrived in Cuba, Juan Ponce de Leon died. His attempt to establish the first permanent colony in North America had ended in complete failure. The discoverer of Florida never colonized it.